Evolution has a very big evidence problem. Disagree? Well, I welcome you to come and bring your evidence for evolution. But before we do that, I'm going to share some reasons, scientific reasons to reject evolution. And I'm going to present a piece of evidence against evolution. After that, anybody can click the link to join the stream. I'm only going to let one person on at a time, so you may have to wait backstage if someone else comes on first. But I'm going to start by giving you 4 scientific reasons to reject evolution. Number 1, the proposed mechanisms to make evolution happen, meaning life diversifying from a common ancestor, are grossly insufficient for producing what is required for the diversity of life. The second reason is mutations degrade. Mutations are supposed to be the primary means by which we get the diversity of life, and mutations work mostly in the wrong direction. We know that mutations mostly degrade organisms. They do not build up in the way that would be required if evolution were true. Number 3, and the evidence that I'm going to focus on tonight focuses on number 3 and 4. Integrated systems require foresight. When you have complex integrated systems, those require planning, and life is all complex integrated systems, down to a very simple cell all the way up through plants, animals. Everything has integrated systems at every level, and that requires planning. Number 4, numerous chicken and egg problems at the cell and system level. And that's what I'm going to start by showing you. Is tonight we're going to talk about one chicken and egg problem, which is a ribosome. So which came first, the DNA coding for the ribosome or the ribosome that was necessary to build the proteins that compose the ribosome? So you've got a problem, because in order to get a ribosome, you have to have a bunch of proteins. But where do you get those proteins? Those proteins are built in the ribosome. So this is one of the multitude of chicken and egg problems with trying to get ribosomes to develop by natural processes. So let's look a little more about what is a ribosome. Well, it's basically a code reader for assembling proteins. It's not just a code reader, it's actually the staging place where proteins are assembled, where the code, the messenger RNA brings the code for building the amino acids into proteins, and the ribosome is what puts all that together and makes the proteins. Now, in a typical mammalian cell, there you have about 10 million ribosomes in one cell. So imagine this. This is like crazy amount of machinery in a single cell. And now in prokaryotes, ribosomes are composed of about 52 proteins and that assemble themselves together. Think about that. Each protein in and of itself would be a massive feat to evolve by natural processes. But then to get a ribosome for a prokaryote, you need 52 protein machines that know how to assemble themselves together. And by the way, they also have little chaperone proteins that make sure that they assemble themselves in the right way. In eukaryotes, it's even more. Ribosomes are composed of about 80 proteins that assemble themselves together. Now, that assembly process is called ribosome biogenesis. So all these little protein machines have to come together in just the right way to build this giant ribosome machine. And I wanted to read this from describing this process. So, and you can look this up. The reference is there. It says the assembly of ribosomal subunits is a highly orchestrated process that involves a huge cohort of accessory factors. Now, this is what? Highly orchestrated process. How do we get what is an orchestrated process? When we're thinking about something that's orchestrated, we're talking about something that is meticulously planned. And that is exactly what this has to be. There is no way to describe a ribosome coming together without using this kind of design language. And why is that? Because it's obvious that a ribosome is designed. This coming together by natural processes is utterly ridiculous. Now, we talked about, and before I go any further with that, I talked before about how utterly ridiculous it is to think that the DNA code came about by natural processes. Codes don't write themselves. We know that. And we can do 1,000 tests right now. And now that we've got AI, we could do tests and see, can we get a code to come together by natural processes? And I'm betting that we won't be able to. And so everything that we know about codes speaks that there has to be a coder. But not only does there have to be a coder, there has to be a code reader for the code to be useful at all. And that's what that ribosome is. And so this is another, to be useful, you've got to have both the genetic code and you've got to have a way to make that code useful. So there's another chicken and egg problem in and of itself. So let's go and just look at, some people will say, oh, but don't you know, we have evolutionary explanations for all this. We can explain how a ribosome evolved. Well, let's see if we can. And I just pulled up this, history of the ribosome and origin of translation. And this is an evolutionary proposal for how a ribosome could have evolved. Now, I'm kind of want people to be aware of evolutionary storytelling when you're reading scientific papers. When going forward, as we go through this, I'm going to highlight everything in pink that's evolutionary storytelling, and anything that's in green is the real science. Now, unfortunately, this entire paper is pink. I mean, except for this one little thing. I mean, basically the whole paper is pink. And I encourage you to go read it yourself. It's in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. You can see the title, so you can look it up, and it's available online. But let's just see how it starts. It says, the ribosome retains interpretable molecular records of a world of primordial molecules from around 4 billion years ago. So they're already starting us off with a story. They're already assuming the evolution of ribosomes. And this is what you'll see throughout, unfortunately, throughout peer-reviewed journals that are supposed to be presenting science. They are full of evolutionary storytelling. So it all assumes that evolution happened. So it starts with that assumption, and then everything else is like they just tell the story about it. And so if we don't assume that evolution happened, then that's when we're doing real science, is when you don't start with the presupposition and then build your entire thing around it. So it says the records are maintained in rRNA, secondary and 3D structures, which are fully conserved throughout the tree of life. So I highlighted in green the fully conserved because this is something that what they're saying is that like these structures are conserved, meaning like it looks similar throughout the tree of life, meaning so ribosomes were basically, or rRNA and the ribosome were basically very similar in whatever life we look in. There are some differences, but it's conserved. And I didn't highlight the tree of life because, again, that's an evolutionary assumption. But it says here, we use information within ribosomes from each major branch of the tree of life to reconstruct much of the emergence of the universal translational machinery. Now, is this a good way to go about this? If evolution is true, there's nothing wrong with what they're doing. They're looking at the branches of the tree of life, and they're trying to look at the simpler, like the organisms that they would consider earlier, and then construct how this could have come about. So there's nothing wrong with it if evolution is true, but there's a major assumption there that evolution is true. So sometimes I find the best things to go against evolution are in these papers themselves. And this is the kind of the diagram that they show of their proposal of these different parts of the ribosome coming together in a certain order, and they've got it numbered in order. And I love this because it shows you how many different working parts have to be together for this to work. And to imagine this assembling itself in a useful way with no intelligent design is ridiculous. So, and I'm just going to give you from the paper, they explain all the phases that are supposed to happen. And I took this one because it was the one that had, it was just the most, the best demonstration of what I'm talking about with the evolutionary storytelling with no scientific evidence given. But the whole thing is like this, but this is a perfect example. So this is, they're saying phase 5 of the construction. So here's how they're supposedly scientifically explaining how the ribosome came together. The ratcheting system is acquired, period. No explanation for how the ratcheting system is acquired, just the ratcheting system is acquired. Thank you. How did it come together? No idea. Next, the binding sites for elongation factors, G and TU, are established along with the L7, L12 stalk and the central protuberance. Okay, again, they just say it's established. There is no science here. They're just giving their story about how it happened. There's no scientific evidence to show how this could have come about or to support the idea that it did come about by a step-by-step process. The 5S are RNA associates and reinforces the central protuberance. Okay, again, more explanation. And I'm not even going to stop with the rest of it. I'm just going to read the whole thing so you can see. These are just statements about adding additions of features with no explanation for how there's no science here. The tunnel is extended. The LSU embraces the SSU from each side by A minor interactions. The B6 bridgehead is elaborated by AES37. Bridges B1A and B1B are formed. Most of the bridges established at this phase are enhanced by ribosomal proteins. Domain 3 is elaborated, stabilizing the P site, tRNA. Domain 5 is elaborated, stabilizing the A site and enhancing the integrity of the SSU. Short expansions, blah, 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 interact with each other via base pairing and form functional. Okay, you get the idea. The entire thing is just them stating what happened. No scientific evidence involved. This is just their story. And that is how the entire paper is. There's no science in this paper. And look at their conclusion. This is their very simple but very storytelling conclusion. The transition from the synthesis of non-coded heterogeneous oligomers to proteins by the ribosome conferred advantages because some reaction products bound to the ribosome. Proteinization of the ribosome drove a more general proteinization of other processes, giving rise to modern biology as described by the central dogma. The ribosome spawned the existing symbiotic relationship of protein and nucleic acid. Story complete. But do you see, like, conferred advantages? What advantages? What advantages do each of those stages of their supposed ribosome building, what advantages does that confer? Because unless it's an entire working machine, it has no advantage to the organism. It's taking up space. And so there's absolutely no explanation given here. So that is the state of where things stand with these evolutionary stories that are being passed off as scientific explanations. There's nothing scientific in that explanation. So now I'm just going to check the comments. If anybody wants to jump in and share your evidence for evolution, go for it. And so Dr. Dan's here. It's complicated. Therefore, evolution is wrong. Well, I think I've given more than just it's complicated, but that is a big part of it. So Dr. Dan is picking on this fully conserved, shared due to common ancestry. So thanks for accepting the evolutionary history. Well, I was trying to highlight the point that it is, this is a feature that we find in all of life. And so they say that the ribosome had to come about by the time of Luca. So in another place, another source I found basically said it had to be between like 3.5 and 4 billion years ago. So we're coming up against a little border there because the Earth is supposed to be 4.5 billion years old, but they keep having to push back the origins of all this complicated machinery further and further back to try to get an explanation. So okay, Mavis says Erica Gutsick-Gibbon gave her a stellar education on evolution, and here she is again lying. Well, I'm not lying, okay? I have no desire to come on here and lie. I'm trying to tell you the truth because unfortunately, I think many people are in a brain fog and they are missing out on the truth about life because they've embraced this story about their origins. Now, I fully admit I have a religious agenda here. I want people to know God. I want people to know God. And I see evolution as a story that people have embraced that actually blocks them from having the best evidence that God has given us for his existence. So, I don't mind if people of faith believe in evolution, but I think evolution is wrong. So, and I do think evolution is one of the things that keeps people from being able to see the evidence for God. I'm not lying. I'm trying to tell you the truth. And I'm glad to see Dr. Dan says he might hop on in a few if the kids are asleep. Awesome. Thank you. And he's, and he follows it up with fun to waste time every now and then. And so, okay, so he goes on to say, okay, but conserved means shared due to evolutionary history. That's just what the word means. And if that's true, if it definitely has the common ancestry lumped in with it, then I would have put it in pink. So thank you for making the entire article pink, evolutionary storytelling. So, and oh, good. Nesslig can come on and talk about the paper on the ribosome. Please do, Nesslig. I'm waiting for you. He says, but I don't have a lot of time. That's okay. You can come on for as long as you've got. Vesuvian says, doesn't conserve just mean that something hasn't changed? That's kind of what, that's why I highlighted it as blue, because I said, okay, well, if they're saying it's just, yeah, exactly, not changed, then that's, I would call that real science. Okay, so no one is joining so far, but it looks like Nesslig might, and looks like Dr. Dan might. So let me just say that, there are a lot of people who are in scientific fields who believe in evolution, who could run circles around me with the science. Okay, somebody could jump on here. And right now, if they ask much more about the ribosome than what I just told you, I'm not going to know. Okay, I am not a scientist. I'm not an expert on any of this. And there are lots of people who have a lot more scientific knowledge than me. Okay, so, and I respect that. I respect the knowledge that people have acquired through hard study. And so I am not here to attack anyone who has made science their profession. I really appreciate and respect you. But at the same time, I believe that you have embraced some beliefs about our origins that are not true. And that's all I'm trying to point out, is I'm trying to show that the evidence for evolution is not what people commonly believe that it is. So, yep. And I'm only going to wait a few more minutes because I don't see anyone joining yet. And I don't really have that much else to say. But since nobody's joining yet, and I don't want to leave it dead space, let's just go back to these problems, the reasons to reject evolution. And by the way, this is not a complete list. There are other problems with the evidence for evolution. For example, the fossil record is also one that I don't mention here, but there is a problem with evolution, and it's been known since the Darwin's time that we do not have the innumerable transitional forms that we would expect if evolution were true. We have forms that appear suddenly. And so, hey, Jamie, glad you're here. Let me get this off the screen for you. How are you? You're muted, by the way.
I'm eating. Sorry. I just wanted to join because no one was joining. And I like this subject because I like the idea of what you're saying.
Jamie's coming in at dinner time. Okay, so maybe says you're not an expert. Why do you reject the evidence that experts present? I don't reject the evidence that experts present if it is qualifying evidence. If it's actual evidence for evolution, I don't reject it. But I do reject the storytelling that goes along with the idea of evolution. So I don't just accept everything that's presented. Jamie, how are you? What do you want to say?
Well, I mean,
I can't hear you.
Oh, no? You can't hear me? One second.
Oh,
can you hear me now?
That's my fault. I forgot to put my headphone in. I'm so sorry. Okay. All right. Stream failed.
You guys hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
You do hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So the thing I usually say that a lot of creationists are like, don't want to say, is like a lot of the science in evolutionary ideas are not wrong because it has to do with genetics and like passing on traits and things like that. I think as a young earth creationists, we should acknowledge those things. But like you showed in your last video, it's like when you actually read the papers, they're operating under the notion that their whole paradigm is true. But then when you actually get into the nitty gritty, they're like, wow, it doesn't really actually support sort of the underlying worldview of the things like that. It doesn't actually make sense of a universal common ancestor. That's just kind of assumed and they operate that way. So there's like these assumptions that are part of like the philosophy, which is kind of a denial of creation. But like some of the operational things that are scientific, are reasonable. So there's like the philosophy of science that underlies the worldview that just kind of presumes it goes all the way back. But none of it actually ever shows that. It just shows like genetic trait. You know what I mean? It's like there's like the worldview part, and then there's like the operational part that shows genetic transfer of traits and passing on of genes. If you want to call that evolution, I don't think any of us deny that. I'm sorry, I'm not an expert or anything. Those sort of disconnect I see going on. So I'll like say like, yeah, all sorts of science is done under the paradigm of evolutionary biology or whatever, but it never ever really shows that like a common ancestor, like a universal common ancestor. It's just made up.
Yeah, it's an assumption made based on the similarities, right? Yep. Do you have evidence that you want to share against evolution? Because Dr. Dan and Nesslig are waiting backstage. So
no, bring them on.
Okay. I'm only bringing one person on at a time now. So thank you, Jamie. See you later.
Hi, good evening.
Hey, how are you, Dr. Dan?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Is the sound coming through okay for
Yep.
Rebecca? And
yeah, sorry, that was my fault. I didn't have my little headphone in, so.
Oh my
Yep.
god, my quality is terrible. I don't know why. It's fine on my end. Hopefully, I stop looking like a robot shortly.
Okay.
Hang on.
Well,
Well, I sound okay. Anyway. Oh well, whatever. Anyway, I just want to point. I know Nesslig wants to talk about RNA stuff and or ribosomes, and he's more well versed in that stuff than I am. So I won't stay long. I just want to make sure that you know, and everyone else that's watching this knows that you like no one needs to come in here and like give you evidence for evolution. You already accept evolution or believe in evolution or whatever word you want to use, but you already do that. So like I don't really I don't know where the disconnect is. I understand that, as you've said, I think the phrase you've used is you believe the story based on faith, whatever, however you describe it, and all good, but you already accept evolution, so I don't know what more evidence you need for a belief that you already have.
well, if we're talking about if the definition of evolution is changes in organisms or changes in allele frequencies in populations over time, I accept both
Yes.
of those
Right.
definitions. What I don't accept is the definition of evolution that I'm going with, which
Which
is
is not the
that,
definition, to be clear.
well, there we don't have another word. You suggested I use universal common
Yeah,
ancestry,
sure. Then
but
you can
that
say,
is
I
not
accept
a
evolution,
process. That's not
but
a
I don't accept
process.
this. Well,
But that's not a process, right? So
okay,
I'm
but
what
you,
I'm rejecting is the process by which we diversified from a common ancestor.
so do you accept speciation, though?
Yes.
Okay, that's diversifying from a common ancestor. So again,
Right.
you accept the evolution, you just want to put a limit on it somewhere. But you accept
Yes.
evolution, to be clear.
Well,
Yeah.
I accept some definitions of evolution.
Well, no, 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 no. You don't accept some definitions. You accept the definition of evolution. You just want it to stop operating at some scale. But, like, to be clear, there is a definition of evolution that you accept is an actual process that occurs, and the outcomes that we observe from that process occur. You just say it stops at some point. But you
Well, to
accept
me, this
evolution.
is playing a word game,
No,
right?
I agree, but it is creationists who play the word game by redefining evolution.
Well, see, and I would say you're playing a word game by trying to get me to accept a much broader
No,
concept
I'm not.
because
I'm
I've
saying
accepted a very narrow concept.
that's not a word game. That's observing evidence and drawing conclusions from it. But no, I don't like word games in this. The definition of evolution is, as you said, changes in allele frequencies over time, changes in the inherited traits of populations over generations. If you want to be a little broader, you might define it as diversification from a common ancestor. Those are all perfectly valid definitions of evolution, and we both accept that those things are things that occur. We both accept evolution
I
according
accept the
to the
first two
definition.
ones that you mentioned.
You
But if
you
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 would
said
like
you
me
accept
to have a
speciation.
word, if you would like me to have a word to use, you can make up a word and I'll use it when you're here. Okay,
Mm,
give me a word that
but they're
describes the
already words.
process of things diversifying from a common ancestor, and I will use
Speciation.
that to.
That's the word for that is speciation. Like
No,
that's the
that's
word. That's
not.
the
That's
definition. That's
not what I'm
literally
looking
the
for.
definition of speciation.
Well, look, that is not speciation. Is not diversifying from a
From a common
single
ancestor.
common
Yes, that
ancestor.
is, you have a common ancestor and then things diversify. That is speciation. That is the process. Like, that's literally the definition of speciation.
Okay, well, I'm here not to argue about definitions. Okay, I've
I'm trying
already
to give
given
you
you my
evidence for
definition. If
evolution.
you reject the definition, then I'm asking you to give me a different word. Do you have evidence to present for evolution?
The fact that we can directly observe all these things I'm talking about. That's evidence.
Okay, what are you observing, right? What are you observing that
Speciation.
mutations have the power to do? And I'm
Speciation, for example. That's evolution.
okay, well, and like I said, I accept speciation. So I'm
Great.
not arguing with that.
Great. You accept evolution. You say if you go too far, it stops. You don't accept it at all scales, but you accept evolution, to be clear. Speciation is evolution. Like,
Dr. Dan, Nesslig's waiting
Right, it's the
backstage,
definition.
and I think he actually has something real to share. So
This is real. I'm trying, I want to clarify for you and your audience that, like, here's the definition of evolution. You accept that that is a true thing that happens.
yes, I accept
Great.
that speciation happens. And so that's it.
And-
Thank you for
and
clarifying
there's a
what
limit.
I believe about
And you were saying
evolution
there's a
and
limit,
what
right?
I don't believe evolution
And you
about
were saying
evolution.
there's a limit.
I
to it.
don't
you say
believe
this process occurs, but there's a limit. Yes.
Yes, I don't
Okay, great.
believe that mutations have the power to bring about the diversity of life.
Okay.
Mutations degrade in general. They
That's not
might,
That's not true.
serendipitously bring about something that could benefit in one way or another,
Mhm.
such as sickle cell anemia, which keeps you from
Nope,
dying
that's a
from
bad
malaria.
example, and that's it.
Okay,
Rebecca, you're
but
better
yeah,
than that
give me
argument.
a
That's
good-
a bad. No, you're
give
better
me a
than that
good one.
argument, and you know it. Come on,
I-
come on. Have
I
some
actually-
self-respect. You're better than that argument.
Give me one.
There's literally a sickle cell resistance allele that doesn't have a disease associated with it. Like, that's a better one. There you go. There's the overexpression of the genes, the upregulation of the genes that allows Tibetan populations to be more functional at higher altitudes. There's lactase persistence that allows us to consume dairy products. Like, those are way better examples than sickle cell. Yeah, sickle cell comes with disease resistance, but obviously if you're homozygous recessive, you have sickle cell disease. All these other things, there's no downside. Like,
And are you saying those came about by mutations that happened
yes.
by chance, or
Yeah.
by the gene regulatory network selecting which
So
things
first,
are
those two things
okay.
are not mutually exclusive, right? The way you change a gene regulatory network is through mutation. So those two things are not mutually exclusive. But we've documented the mutations for those things. Yes, like we know
Right,
what
but-
the difference in the sequences are. Yes.
But the difference is that when something is done by
It's
the gene
evolution.
regulatory network, right? That is like that's like an intentional improvement.
No, it's not. It's just a mutation.
Rather-
And we can I'll give you an example of this with lactase persistence. The two main alleles for lactase persistence are to a region called an enhancer. An enhancer binds to transcription factors, and when the right transcription factors bind, it increases the expression of the gene that it regulates. And we can document the two mutations to an enhancer that are just upstream of the lactase gene. And when you have one of those two mutations, it greatly increases the biochemical affinity for the transcription factor, and it upregulates the expression. Like, I can give you chapter and verse on like exactly biochemically how it works. There's no intentionality. It's literally just a mutation that affects the biochemical efficiency. And that is evolution. That is a change in the genetic composition of a population that has increased in frequency over generations. Like, we agree on that. That's just a thing we should be able to agree on.
Well, I haven't looked deeply into that and
I
exactly
just
what is
explained it to you.
happening.
You're welcome.
Okay, yeah, I know, but and if you're correct, then that's
I'm
great.
correct.
But
No, I'm correct. There's no if. Like, I just explained it to you. There's no if. I'm correct.
well,
I just explained it to
I
you.
like to check my sources and understand what's going on. Okay, so I will have to check that for myself. But
Okay.
what I'm saying is, if we're talking about something that the gene net regulatory network does, I think that's actually a problem for evolution, because you've got to explain, where did gene regulatory networks figure out what
That's
is
a good question.
needed?
See,
And-
that's moving the goalpost, because the question was evidence for evolution, and I gave you an observed example of evolution. You're
But
saying, actually, that observed example of evolution isn't evolution.
No, and what I'm saying is, I'm trying to distinguish, because what we need for evolution by natural processes
Mhm.
is
Which I
for
just described.
things to come about by mutation, like not guided mutation, just mutation plus natural selection,
I
right?
just want
And
to
so
point out
there's
you're
a
moving the
very
goalposts on
there's
this
a it's a
question.
very
Just want to
different
point that out.
it's a very different thing when you have an existing system that makes a change in order to help the organism function better in the environment. And so
I have an
that's
answer
the
for you.
distinction I would like to figure out.
Okay.
Is this what happens? Is this a product of the gene regulatory network making a selection for what is better for the organism?
I mean, the answer is no, but I just want to point out here that you asked for mutations that were, beneficial, right? Mutations that didn't break things, that gave a new beneficial trait. I gave you a very clear example where we know the specific mutation and the biochemical network, and then you move the goalpost to, but how did that regulatory scheme evolve in the first place? I just want to be
No,
clear
I'm
that
not
that's
moving
what
the
just happened there.
goalpost.
You
No,
did.
I'm not
Yes,
moving
you
the
did.
goalpost because
Mhm.
actually what you're doing is you're making any change that happens a mutation. Okay, so if you're going
No,
to
we can
use,
no, that's not true. We
and
can
that's
document
fine.
these
That's fine.
mutations. I'm making
And
this one a
that's
mutation because we know what it
if
is.
you if you want to use mutation in that way, that's fine. If
It's
that's
literally
what
the
we're talking
definition of
about, if we're
Rebecca,
talking
that's
about
the
all
definition of
changes,
mutation. If I
if
want to,
that's
wait,
fine,
if I
that's
want to
fine.
use mutation in that way, the definition of mutation is a change in the
Okay.
nucleotide sequence. That's a mutation.
Right. And
What do you mean
what
if I
I'm
want to
trying
use
to
it in that way? This is why I've said that this exercise is a dishonest exercise. Do you see what just happened there?
Okay, well, since I'm dishonest, there's no point in talking to me. Thanks for coming on. See ya. Hey, Nesslig.
Hello, mic check. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for having me on. I just want to have some notes about the paper that you showed. It's a very, very interesting paper. I love the stuff that Anton Petrov and Laurent D. Williams write about the ribosome. It's not the only paper, of course, but it's a very interesting paper. Can you bring it back up again, or is it possible?
Oh, sure. Yes, but I only have a few screenshots from the paper. It'll take me a minute if we're going to pull up the whole paper. So do you want me to grab the whole paper? Just give me a second.
It's best to bring up the whole paper,
Yeah.
so you can we can look up things that are perhaps relevant.
Yep. Just give me a minute to look for it. But in the meantime, if you want to start talking about it, go for it.
Oh yeah, you said that like most of the stuff is like just speculation, not science. But I disagree, of course, because there is actually very good evidence that they provide there. It's just asking that about like can you scroll down or flip pages perhaps? Oh, there we go. One more page, I think. There we can see a very good figure. Let's see here. Next one. Yeah, that one. Yes. So they propose. So they propose 6 phases regarding the origin and evolution of the ribosome. Can you tell one of the lines of evidence that they point towards for proposing these 6 phases? Do you know?
What's that?
Do you know one of the lines of evidence that they cite to propose this model that they have given here?
Why don't you tell me which one you're talking about?
Well, you're the one who brought up the paper and you are the one critiquing it. So you're saying that they are all speculating, but I'm just pointing out there are lines of evidence that they cite in this paper. So just ask.
Okay, if there's a line of evidence that I missed, I'd like to hear about it. So what is it?
Oh, it's okay. Okay. So can you look up A minor interactions in the paper? Or can you like Control F search for words or something, or maybe something else?
Hold on. I think you're asking more than I can do because this is it's not on my.
It's not a PDF. It's not a PDF. All right.
It is in a PDF, but I only have one screen here, so I will need to go off and go. So you can do it on your if you can do it on your computer.
Yeah, I also have the paper. I also have the paper on my screen as well. Let's see, or maybe I can show it. Can I show my?
Yeah. Yes, you can.
Let's see. Hold on. I need to organize my tabs on my screen. Let's see here. Hold on a minute. Let's see here. All right. Present. Share screen. Hold on. Share screen. Right. All right. This is not a PDF, but it's just on the PNS website. So if I Control F A dash minor interactions. So this is one of the lines of evidence that they cite for proposing the phases. Basically, A minor interactions, though basically that is one of the way how the ribosome latches itself into a three-dimensional structure. Or maybe I can also give you one. Did they give one example from a minor interaction in the paper? I'm not sure. Let's see here. Hold on. No, that's not that's a different line of evidence. They also point towards these insertion fingerprints as another line of evidence for proposing the history of the ribosome. But I want to show you the A minor interaction. Hold on a minute. Where is it? An example? I don't think there is an example of this. Let's see here. Maybe I can Google image A minor interaction. A minor. Let's see here. I think this is a good example. Let's see here. All right. Let's see here. Am I showing a different paper right now? Yes, I'm showing a different paper. This is also from the same journal, but this is a good image of a minor interaction. Let's see here. Where's a good example of an A minor? There we go. Yes. So this is an A minor interaction. You see that on one hand, you have like a double-stranded RNA on the one hand. Can you see my cursor?
Yes, I can.
All right. So like on one side, you see a double-stranded RNA. It's a bit a different color. And then on the other hand, you also see a different double-stranded RNA structure. And what happens is the one on the right has 3 nucleotides colored red. And these three nucleotides, they swing outward and they fit into to a groove on the helix on the left-hand side. This is an A minor interaction. And the reason why it's called A minor interaction is because these 3 nucleotides, they are often adenine nucleotides, like one of the 4 letters of the RNA or DNA, adenine. Like you have adenine, you have thymine, you have guanine, and cytosine, but adenine is one of them, which are often involved in these interactions. And the adenine fit into the minor groove of this helix on the left-hand side. And this is why we call them A minor interactions. So far, so good?
Yeah. So what's the evidence that this constructed itself by a natural process?
Well, the reason is because like this structure on the left is stable by itself. It does not rely on the helix on the right hand to stabilize, but the helix on the right side does rely on the left hand side to stabilize, because this is unstable by itself. But if these 3 nucleotides fit into this helix, then this does become stable. So what does it tell you? Which one is older? Is the one on the left older, or one on the right older than this?
Well, what you're doing is you're starting with an evolutionary assumption. So you're assuming that there's an older one, right?
No, I'm simply pointing out the structural integrity. This is self-stable. It does not rely on this helix, but this helix does rely on the left to be stabilized. So what does it tell you?
Okay.
No evolutionary assumption, just molecular stability. Which one which one can exist without the other?
Well, the stable one.
Yes,
the stable
exactly.
one. Okay.
This one is older than on the one on the right. And this is one of the reasons. These interactions are like they are all over the ribosome. Let's see here if you can see another image on the original paper, where we see the A minor interactions. Perhaps they don't. I don't think they show a good image on the no. In this paper, we don't see the A minor interactions. Let's see. Maybe you can find a different paper where we show the A minor interactions in the ribosome. Let's see here. Well, if I cannot find it right away, then let's see. Let's just say that they are all over the place, because this is one of the strongest interactions within the ribosome that holds itself together, basically. Yeah, they are all over the place. And they use these A minor interactions to basically say, like, oh, they go over here, like, oh, the ones with the ones that have the structural cell stability are older than the ones that are dependent on the previous phase, basically using these A minor interactions. And so that's one of the lines of evidence they use to construct these phases, like phase the blue one, phase 1, the cyan colored one is phase 2, and then phase 3 is green, and phase 4 is yellow, phase 5 orange, and phase 6 is red. So basically, like one example is phase 1 has A minor interactions with phase 2, but the A minor interactions the structure in phase 1 is not dependent on the interactions with phase 2, but the parts in phase 2 are dependent on the parts in phase 1. And that's how they construct these. That's how they have constructed this model.
Right. And, like I said, if evolution is true, then this is a good idea, right? Like, it's not a bad idea. It's not a bad proposal if evolution is true. But if we're trying to figure out if evolution is true, this is not evidence that it happened this way, right? So, like,
it's one pretty strong evidence, because it's relying on the very structural stability itself. We don't have any assumptions about common ancestry or something. Just the molecular structural integrity of the ribosome itself gives us clues of which parts of the ribosome preceded other parts of the ribosome. Because then, like, it's very straightforward logical thinking. The ones that are structurally stable by themselves are older than the ones that are structurally dependent on the previous parts. Just a very, like, it's basically like also let's see, one good example in life will be like if you let's see here.
Do you understand my point, though? That if evolution is true, then this is not a bad way to go about reconstructing, right? But we're talking about that evolution is in question. Okay, all of this starts with the assumption that evolution is true. I'm not starting with that assumption. I don't think evolution is true.
Well,
this paper is just a story about how they think evolution happened.
So far we haven't discussed the evolutionary assumptions. So far we've only discussed the A minor interactions, which is just the physical chemistry of RNA and how the ribosome is structured. We haven't talked about the evolution even yet. So, and also my point is that you claimed that this paper is all pure speculation. There is no evidence provided, but the A minor interaction is one of the lines of evidence that they cite in the paper to construct this model.
But do you understand
acknowledge that?
I acknowledge that if evolution is true, then that could be a line of evidence for why we should pursue.
Even if you say that the whole of evolution is wrong, this line of evidence still holds.
It doesn't hold. It doesn't hold because do you see what you're doing? You're assigning ages, right? So if evolution is not true, you're assigning ages based on stability. So if evolution is not true, there's no age to it, right? So this is a machine that comes together in a cell, and there may be slight variations on that. I mean, there's definitely variation between prokaryote and eukaryote, but there's no age. There's no this came first and then that, because that belongs to the evolutionary story.
Well, if like I pointed out in this A minor interaction, the helix on the left is stable without the one on the right, but the one on the
Right.
right is not stable without the one on the left. So that by itself tells you which one is older than the other one. Yes.
Nesslig, and see, this is
there is no other way.
Nesslig. Look, you are now. If you're saying okay, then in the few seconds it takes to construct, or however long it takes to construct, right? Then that one came first. Okay, fine. I don't know anything about which proteins bind to which ones to make the ribosome and in which order.
Well,
Okay.
we are so far talking about RNA and not proteins yet.
Okay.
In any case.
Okay, so then the RNA. Okay, so but what I'm saying is, if evolution is not true, there's no reason to assign an age unless you're just doing the order as like, okay, I mean, you can say the order in which they assembled, right? But like,
right,
not assigning the age. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, because to me it is pretty straightforward that just based on the structural integrity, like one very common example in construction is when you build a house, the base of the house is stable by itself. The base comes first before you build up the structure, right? So
yes,
it has to be built up, of course.
Okay, that's fine.
The same cases also applies here. The one itself stable has to be older than the one that is not stable by itself.
Okay, then can it be older by a few seconds or however long it takes in the process of building the ribosome?
Like we haven't talked about specific ages at all, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure the paper.
Do you see what I'm getting at? Like, if we're just talking about the way it has to be built up, which I don't know anything about that, right? But if I'm taking apart the age, if I'm taking out the age part of it, maybe this is the way it's built up. I've never looked into that. Do you know much about that? Like right now, when it's constructed, like right now, I'm not talking about evolution.
You mean how the cell constructs the ribosome?
Yes,
the cell,
how it constructs now.
The cell does not construct a ribosome like this. This is not how the cell itself constructs a ribosome.
Okay, so then you're not talking about the order of construction. So then
of course, like it's not. We are not talking about how ribosomes form in living cells today. We are not talking about that.
Okay, then that's why I'm saying unless you're talking about that, there's a major problem with you presenting this as evidence for evolution, because you are starting with the assumption that something had to come first. Well, if you're not talking about the ordering, then you're talking about in an evolutionary scenario, one had to come.
I think we are getting too far ahead of ourselves, because so far I have not talked about evolution even yet. I'm just saying that this, like, just going back to my point, what I want to point out is that you claim that this paper is just pure speculation. They provide no evidence.
Yes.
But I have pointed out that it's just one of the lines of evidence that they point to is the A minor interactions. That's the one of line of evidence that they point towards. And it has nothing to do with common descent or evolution or something like that. It's just citing the structural integrity of the ribosome itself and how. And citing evidence of pointing out that, this structure on the left hand has to be older than the one on the right. There is no other way to otherwise the one on the right is just it cannot self-stabilize and it will just disintegrate.
Right, and if evolution is true, this seems like a logical way to construct it.
No, it's
But
also.
what I'm saying is this does not provide.
It doesn't depend. Like again, we are not dependent on evolutionary assumptions here. We are just dependent on the structure, the very chemistry of the RNA itself. We haven't talked about any evolution yet. We just cite which part of the RNA is structurally self-stable and which part is dependent on the previous part.
Right, but the reason we're held up on this point, and I will we can move on from it if you want, but I'm just trying to clarify because you weren't satisfied with me saying this is good. If evolution is true, this is a line of evidence.
It
You
doesn't
want
matter.
it to
If
still apply.
tomorrow,
Wait, let me finish though.
Oh,
You're
sorry.
wanting it to apply broadly as evidence for evolution, and I'm saying it is not evidence that a ribosome came together by natural processes. There's nothing here that's evidence that that happened.
Well, no. Again, I disagree with that. Like, if we, for the sake of the argument, if we right now assume the whole of evolution is wrong, this evidence still applies. There is no, again, we are not dependent, like this argument of the A minor interaction does not depend on whether we share common ancestry with chimpanzees or whether we share common ancestry with a gymnosperm or something like that. It just cites the chemistry of the RNA of the ribosome itself. We are not dependent on any evolution here.
Okay, well, I've established my problem with what you've said, but let's just move on so you can get to share your evidence.
I just did. This is one of the evidence that I wanted to cite. Like, you claimed that the paper does not cite any evidence, but this is one of the evidences that they cite in the paper. So this is my point that I want to bring up.
But do you understand my point? Can you say what? Can you try to tell me what my point is?
You want to think this as a package deal, like, oh, you cannot accept this without accepting the other stuff with it. And I'm not saying like, no, you don't have to do that.
Okay, what are you wanting me to accept?
This paper, where they propose a model for the origins of the ribosome, they do cite evidence. And while you previously claimed they do not cite evidence, it's just pure storytelling that you claimed previously.
Right. Well, they cite evidence for their model under the assumption that evolution is true. They do not cite evidence for evolution of a ribosome. They cite no evidence for evolution of a ribosome.
One of the things that they cite is A minor interactions, which we discussed right here. This right here is the evidence they discussed.
And we're kind of going in circles here. So
right, because
now let me try to say what you're trying to do
over and over again.
I know, and that's why we need to break the misunderstanding, because one of us is not understanding. Okay, so let me say what I think you're saying, and then you tell me what you think I'm saying. Okay?
All right.
Do you want me to repeat the point I'm trying to get across?
All right.
The point I'm trying to get across is that you're saying that the stable one had to come first. And I'm saying that's true, maybe if evolution is true. But since I don't accept evolution, to me, just showing one that's stable and one that's unstable, that doesn't tell me anything about whether one of them came first. Unless you're just talking about the order of construction. But see, I don't accept that one of them came first. So what is the actual evidence that one of them preceded the other one by millions of years or whatever is the proposal?
Oh, well, we are talking about a timeline here. We just point out that based on the structural stability, one has to come first. Because let's say the one, if the one on the left does not exist, this one cannot exist.
Yes, I understand.
It cannot be stabilized. But the one on the left can exist without the one on the right. That alone points out that the one on the left is older than the one on the right. We don't know by how much older, of course. It doesn't tell us how exactly what age we are talking about. We are just saying the chronology. It's all the relative chronology. The one on the left preceded.
Yes. So
right.
Let me repeat what you're saying. Yeah. So what you're saying is that we don't know the timeline, but we do know that one had to come before the other because one is stable, the other one is not stable. The unstable one would never be first, right?
Mhm.
And so therefore, this is evidence that the stable one came first. And this is evidence for evolution.
No.
Okay.
Like we aren't talking about evolution. So as of now, we like you're trying to jump ahead to something else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But do you understand what I'm saying about I don't accept one came first unless you're just talking about the order of construction that happens right now in cells today.
But again, the way the cells make the ribosome is not like they don't make this part first and then they make this part. That's not how that's not how cells make the ribosome. They just like if I remember
And I'm not
correctly,
saying they do. I admitted I don't know
Yeah.
the process. Okay. I don't know I don't know the order in which the ribosome is constructed today.
Like basically, the ribosome is constructed into a large subunit and a small subunit. And if I remember correctly, the large subunit is made of two RNA molecules, and the small subunit is made of one RNA molecule. Again, if I memorize correctly, that's how the cell. But in here, like let's see here. This is also a good image. Yeah, it's basically let's see, like. This is the three-dimensional structure of the ribosome, the modern ribosome, where you have like a large subunit and a small subunit. But in here is basically a metro map where they flatten out the ribosome, the RNA, at least the RNA part. Of course, the ribosome also is protein, but so far we're only talking about the RNA component of the ribosome. So they flatten it out in a two-dimensional map here, just where you can view it more thoroughly. So basically, this whole thing is a small subunit. Let's see, I think it is a small subunit. Let's see here, figure D. Let's see here, figure. Where is D? Let's see here. Oh, A and B. There's a small subunit, large subunit, A and B. Oh yeah, that's A and B. This is a small subunit, large subunit, and it is at the same, and this is the same image. Yeah. Although here they color coded it differently than here. In here they color coded it according to the phases that they propose. The phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Yeah. So this is a small subunit. It's one RNA. So basically, you have an RNA gene in your DNA genome, and that when it's transcribed into RNA, this is the whole structure of that RNA. It's not like we make this blue part first, and then we make the cyan part next, and then we make this green part next. That's not how the cell makes the ribosome.
Yeah.
It's just the whole strand is made in one go.
Right.
Also the case for the large subunit as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually the point I was trying to make about the ribosome is that this is an incredibly complex structure, and it all comes together beautifully and works as many machines functioning together in order to be able to produce proteins. So
the way that it works doesn't really it's not very similar to how machines work at our scale, but in any case, it's besides the point.
Yeah, Nesslig, just out of curiosity, what is your scientific background? Like, have you studied science? Do you have a degree in this? Or?
Yeah, I'm currently a PhD candidate. I'm very busy working on my thesis and such, but I know
Nice.
so far I'm not willing to talk about where and when and such, because I still want to remain anonymous.
That makes sense. But that's nice to know. And thank you for taking the time to come on here. Okay, so where is the part that you think is evidence for evolution?
I was just to swing next to the next topic, basically. Let's see here.
Okay, however you want to do it. And I'm sorry, Mirza is waiting backstage, but I don't know if he's going to get on today because I do think you're doing something substantive here. So Mirza, just to let you know, I don't know if you're going to get on.
The only reason why I came on was I disagreed with your portrayal of this paper. Like you said that this paper was all speculation and setting no evidence. I just wanted to point out that it does cite evidence. It cites just one of the things. It also cites other things, but one of the main things it cites is these A minor interactions, and that's all I'm here for. So for next time, I really recommend you reading the whole paper first before jumping to a conclusion. Like they are just storytelling without any evidence. Like,
well, I did read the whole paper. I did read the whole paper. Now, I'm not saying I understood everything, but I did like there's terms in there that I don't like. I don't know the meaning of the terms of some of the parts that they're constructing. But I did not see any evidence, and I still don't. You're showing me evidence if evolution is true. If evolution is true, then this is evidence for this model. But the title of this is the history of the ribosome and the origin of translation. So I'm looking in here. I'm looking for what is the evidence that this ribosome came about by natural processes. How did the origin of translation come about by natural processes? I don't see that here.
Well, but this is the problem, because if you don't understand this paper, then how can you make the conclusion that they all just are storytelling? That's the problem here.
Well, I mean, what might not understand?
You have to try to understand the paper first before you can come to a conclusion like, oh, they are just storytelling. That's not how this works.
Well, I mean, I'm good at picking out the evolutionary nonsense now. Okay, so when I see that there's no explanation for
if you don't understand the paper, how can you pick out the evolutionary nonsense?
Well, you're here and you're working on your PhD. So why don't you enlighten me? What am I missing? Where is the evolutionary evidence for this happening?
I just explained the evidence that they cite in this paper.
But I already explained to you why this is not evidence. And when I said you're saying this is evidence for evolution, you said no, we haven't gotten there yet. So when do we get there? When do we see the evidence?
I'm just saying, like, your portrayal of this paper is wrong. They do cite evidence, and one of the pieces of evidence is this. That's all I'm here for so far. It's step one. Step one. You want to go to step 4, 16, 28? Like, no, I'm just here for step 1 so far.
Okay. So is that all the steps like that you want to share?
Yeah, right now, I do need to go soon.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Take care, Nesslig. All right. Bye-bye.
Hey, how are you? Hey, Rebecca. How are you? Good. I wasn't going to talk about this. Maybe what the previous caller meant to say was the paper is not a proof of evolution because they don't really go proving evolution in every paper. If that's what I mean, you assume previous proof and then you go. For example, every physics paper doesn't prove Einstein's theory of relativity; it just assumes it's there.
Right.
But yeah, my question to you was, I was kind of hoping you can clarify what your position is, what your worldview is. So, for example, when what's her name, Gatsy Gibbon, I forgot her actual name. She went step by step. What's her name? Erica, yes, Erica. So she went step by step, all the changes in pelvis and everything. So do you now accept that humans and chimps share a common ancestor, or?
I do not accept that.
Even though you can see gradual change in evolution in the fossil record and all the changes in the genome and all that.
Well, let me tell you that. So remember, I gave Erica credit for showing evidence for evolution because remember, she shared that, hey, we came up with this idea of evolution. We said humans evolved from an ape-like ancestor. And so we predicted that we would find forms in the fossil record that had ape-like features, human-like features, maybe a move toward bipedalism, a move to a larger brain, something like that, right? So we would
Right.
expect those type of features, right, to be
Right.
found. And then lo and behold, she gives evidence for those type of features being found. So I count that as evidence for evolution. But
Yeah.
but I actually don't accept that those forms that we found are in a lineage of ancestry. Okay. There's a lot of interesting creatures on Earth. Okay. And so they have different forms. So when I
So
see those
maybe
features,
they just look like our ancestors, but they're not.
I'm saying assuming that they are our ancestors is an interpretation of the data.
Right.
And I don't accept that interpretation of the data. I think, okay, there I see a bipedal ape. Cool. And you know, so it can be constructed into an idea of like, okay, here's the process, but I don't accept that I don't accept that interpretation. But I did credit her with the predictive, you know, the evolution making a prediction about what we would find and us finding some of what we predicted, right?
Right.
So
So then how would you explain it then? What was your position?
my position on like
Yeah, we
Australopithecines
have
and all that. Yeah.
this was a prediction. The prediction, was verified.
Yeah.
How would you
And
what theory do you have that better fits what we've seen and that better predicts what we will find?
I don't know that I have a better one. I'm saying, okay, I accept that as, you know, evidence for evolution. And I'm saying I don't accept that interpretation. I happen to believe that those are just organisms that had those features, right? And
Right.
that they're not in a progression. So,
So it just looks like they are, but might not. I understand what you're saying. It's like the thing is, there for any set of facts, there are infinitely many explanations. You know what I mean? You can always make another theory. So how do you pick one? Well, you pick one that fits the best and it's the simplest. That's called Occam's razor, right? And that's also most likely. There's something called most likely. So the thing is, let's say for example, we have a museum, and inside a museum there's a vault and there's a diamond, right? And let's say diamond disappears, right? So we can postulate somebody stole it, right? A guy stole it, or we can say a wizard made it disappear, right? And if you say, well, no, I think the guy stole it because, we know men exist, we know they steal. And then somebody says, yeah, but how they get into the vault? Can you explain that? And I can't, but I never seen a wizard before, right? So we kind of look at the things that we see in nature and we use that to explain as best we can. Now, there could be a different explanation. And I was going to ask you about that too. Like what explanation do you think it would be? But, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Do you want to say something? I had a thought.
yeah, well, in that situation, I would definitely accept somebody probably stole it.
Why?
Right? Because that's typically more what we would find. I'm not typically a believer that somebody could do that by magic, although it's possible. So I'm not ruling it out. But
yeah, but how would you explain this person getting into the vault, right? You cannot explain everything. So this is what I see with you. You kind of like nitpick. Well, how do you explain this little thing? How do you explain this little thing? How do you explain? Yes, sure. This prediction came true, and this looks exactly like we would expect. But I don't expect that because, So it's like you can't explain everything, but we know that humans exist and they steal. And even if we cannot explain how a thief did it, that doesn't mean we jump to the wizard. You know what I mean? And that would be my next question. Like, you seem to accept, for example, bacterial resistance, that bacteria get resistant to antibiotics. You can see it's like saying, but you're saying this one thing is, too big of a change. It cannot happen with evolution, right? So how would you say, for example, these cellular mechanisms you're describing, would they come to be? Like, did they just pop into existence? Did God will atoms in place? Like, how would you explain them?
Well, I believe in a divine event that God created. Okay.
So
But now
just
I'm not trying to present that to anyone as a scientific explanation. Like I know that is a story I believe about origins. Okay.
right, but did they just like pop out of nothing, or did God move all the atoms into place? How did you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I can tell you what I believe about that, and I believe the details that the Bible gives us. Okay, but again, I'm
Right.
not presenting that as a scientific explanation. I'm presenting it as a story I believe, and it says that God spoke. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God said, "Let there be creatures in the sea," and things like that. So that's a story I believe. Now, beyond that, like exactly how the mechanism of God speaking and things coming into existence, I'm not going to be able to explain that.
So the evolution kind of explains it. There's some holes, but it's a real thing we can see, and we know like the bacteria develops resistance. We see these fossils that kind of prove what we're saying. That's on one hand, and on the other hand, we never seen God. We never seen things pop into existence. You kind of have to go just like with the thief and the wizard example. You may not be able. You go with natural explanation. That's what I'm trying to say, right?
Well, that depends on, when you examine the evidence, if you believe that the naturalistic explanation is the better one, then that's what you go with. I have looked at the natural explanation.
That's the only one. It's not better one. It's the only one. If you have a better one, that would be something. But you cannot tell me if these things popped into existence or what happened, right? You don't have an alternative explanation.
Well, I don't
Just
think
like
that we've been promised a
explanation, right?
scientific explanation for everything. So what I mean is like, just assume for a minute that it's true that God created.
Right.
Okay. And he's given us lots of ability to study and get scientific explanations for many things and processes in the world. Right.
Right.
But there's a limit to our scientific explanations, and we don't have access to the explanation about how the creation happened. So
right.
But to us to say no, but we must have a naturalistic explanation, then you're actually limiting your ability to discover truth about the world.
Why must we have any explanation? Why must we? There's no law of nature that says that we'll be able to know and explain everything. Some things may forever be unknown, right? So why must there be any explanation? Like if we cannot see natural explanation, why must we assume something? Like, why can't we just say we don't know and we may never know?
Okay, well, I'm okay with that.
Right.
But I don't think, I think it's still good to pursue explanations where we can get them. But I mean, I think that's a more humble attitude to take than to say we can't explain evolution because there's all these problems, but we know it happened. Right? Like to assume that it happened, that to me is it actually in order to believe that, you have to believe many things that actually contradict our scientific observations.
I don't think that they necessarily, like the examples things that are hard to understand are not necessarily contradictions. They're just things we can't explain. So for example, again with the thief, right? If you suspect that Jim did it, but Jim is on camera being somewhere else at that time, that proves that he didn't do it. But if you cannot explain how Jim got into the vault, that doesn't prove that he didn't do it. You just can't explain it. Same thing with the big problem for evolution used to be disappearance of dinosaurs, right? You couldn't explain that with natural selection and mutations and such, and it wasn't explained by evolution. It was a giant meteor came and killed them all, right? So things that doesn't contradict the evolution, but there was no evolutionary explanation. So things we can't explain are not necessarily proof against. They're just questions we have. Like if you can,
Right. Yeah,
if
and
you
that's
looked at a
fine.
cell and it
Yeah.
said, Jesus is the Lord, that would prove that God made it, right? That would definitely be proof. But if we say we can't exactly explain how this works, that doesn't mean that that's not proof against evolution. That's just something we don't know.
Yeah, and I agree with that like it's okay not to know things, right? Like, so it's okay to say we don't know how this happened. But what I'm saying is, for something to be called a scientific theory, right, it should have behind it a good amount of evidence for it. And that's the problem that I think evolution has, is that it doesn't actually have the good evidence. And so it's being assumed to be true because it's the only explanation by natural processes. So it's being assumed to be true,
Right.
even though it contradicts scientific observations.
Right. It doesn't. So when you say contradict, what do you mean by that? Does it mean we can't explain X, or does it mean it's impossible? What do you mean when you say contradicts, right?
Yeah, I would say it contradicts in that, I mean, it would take a while to go all the way that it contradicts. But, so basically, let's just start with the law of biogenesis, right? We have done tests and many tests to show life does not come from chemicals. Okay. Like, so right now we have the law of biogenesis, which is life only comes from other living things. It does not come from any non-living thing. Chemicals do not produce life. That is something that we have observed about the world. Now, I'm not saying it couldn't be overturned if we found evidence tomorrow that chemicals could come together to form life. Then we could accept that. But for right now, our scientific observations say life does not come about that way. But in order to accept life and evolution happening by natural processes, you have to accept a contradiction to our scientific observations.
Is that a contradiction, or is just something we can't explain? That's what I mean. Just like
right now it's a contradiction. Right now it's a contradiction.
I mean, we haven't found a way. It's not the same as it's impossible to. Same with dinosaurs. We couldn't explain it, and then we did. It's not a contradiction, even though it can be explained with evolution, right? Same with I'm sorry, my mind is tired. But that's not contradiction. Would be like if Bible said, I created everything, and you'll find proof buried 20 miles underneath it, and then we go dug it up, and it's really there. Or if we I don't know, if we went on the other side of the moon and there's like Jesus there, well, that would be like undeniable proof. But something we can't explain is not. It's like an alibi proves that something is not true, that somebody is not a suspect, versus not being able to explain how that person might have committed a murder.
Now,
right?
I agree
it's not
with
a contradiction. It's just something we can't explain yet.
Well, but okay, if we're calling this science, then we should follow the scientific evidence that we have, right?
Right. But it's not a contradiction. It's just it's something not explained by our best theory to date. You know what I mean?
Okay, but our best theory to date contradicts it. So should we go with our best theory to date, or should we accept the one that contradicts our scientific observations?
How does it not explain is not the same as contradicts. Just like why does the sun shine? We didn't know for the longest time we don't know why. We didn't know about nuclear fusion or whatever. And now we do. So we couldn't explain why the sun shines, but that's not a contradiction. How life started over, I don't know how many millions of years it took or whatever. That's something we cannot explain. That's not an impossibility under evolution. You know what I mean? something that contradicts would prove that evolution is not possible. Something that's not yet explained doesn't prove that it's not. Say same with disappearance of dinosaurs. It's not. It was unexplained. It wasn't a contradiction. It's.
Okay, so what do you think would qualify as something that could possibly contradict evolution?
So if we found people bones with dinosaur bones, that would be a huge one. If if we like look up a cell under electron microscope and it says Jesus is the Lord, or if there's like so many things that could falsify it. If right, you get the idea, right? If we looked at DNA of humans and chimps and it's nothing alike, or if we you get the idea, basically, right?
I do. So you're telling me if we ever find a person with a dinosaur in the fossil record, you will no longer believe
it has to be overwhelming, right? It can't be like one or two. It has to be like overwhelming. Right now, you can clearly see like fossils in layers, the simpler going up and in complexity. There's time when there were no mammals, then there was time when there were no people, then there were time and so on. Now sometimes maybe something could get mixed up somewhere, but that would be rare. If it's like consistently you see, I don't know, humans with first amoeba or fossil of cat that's 3 billion years old or something like that. And it has to be overwhelming, not just one-off thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and all of the examples that you gave, we have lots of contradictions like that, and they move the timeline around all the time. I mean, just a few months ago, they moved the tetrapod timeline by 40 million years because of a discovery. So what I mean is like, the things that you're citing that would be contradictions to evolution have already been found. There's lots of contradictions to evolution. Every time we find convergent evolution, that's a contradiction to evolution. And so
not necessarily. I don't see how that.
Well, I mean,
Right.
the reason that things are supposed to have evolved from a tree, right, is because that we group them together is
Right.
because the things that are produced in life are so fantastic and incredible. It's hard to imagine that they could even come about once by natural processes. But then we find them and they don't match a tree. Now, if evolution is true, we should like see all these morphologies that are grouped together in a nice tree, and that should match up with the genetics, and it should match up with the proteins that are in all of those. And instead, you have a mess. Right? No, they do not.
Right.
There's contradictions on every tree.
Yeah, I understand. For example, some animals keep evolving into crabs, or some. There's.
Yes, thank you.
Right. But for example, though, we know that deer and kangaroo, they kind of have similar features. They occupy similar niche, but we can see that deer are more closely related to wolves than kangaroos, right? And that's what we would expect from continent of Australia being isolated. So it makes sense that there'll be like evolutionary niches, like herbivores and prey, ambush predators and persistence predators, and but we can you can still see the evolutionary, like why would God make deer and wolves more closely related than deer and kangaroos, right? That makes no sense. It would make sense evolutionary, but right.
Well, and actually you're hitting on something, Mirza, that is brought up by Cornelius Hunter, who's been on the channel several times, and
right.
he talks about how the strongest evidence for evolution is actually those type of theological ideas, like God wouldn't do it this way, therefore evolution is true, right? Like, why would God do it? Why would God, as you said, like make something more similar to another thing? And so
Right, why would
you're
he? Right.
actually relying on a theological idea, not a scientific idea there.
I am falsifying it based on its own premise, right? If you say X is true, and I say if X is true, then Y is true, but Y is not true, therefore X is not true. That's the kind of argument. But no, okay. But can you explain to me your kind of worldview? So you think God created like humans separately and all these animals separately,
Yes.
and they are very genetically similar because they have similar function, right?
Well, I mean, I can't get in God's mind about why he created anything in a certain sort of way. But,
Right.
but you know, I think
How did God,
it
like,
makes
create-
sense. It makes sense. I mean, why would you recreate? I mean, you could recreate everything, but I mean, I don't really see an objection there. So like what I
Right.
mean is
The
like
objection
I just
is-
accept the world as God created it. And I think when I look at the world, there's a lot of signs that this is designed, that this is something that did not come together by natural processes. So
yeah, but the thing is, if you assume that God designed it, right? If you start from that assumption, you can make it fit. Like you can always find an argument that would support that. But if you start from facts, would you reach that as the most like? That's what I'm saying. Like if you start from a conclusion and look back, you can always make an argument why that's true. But
right. No, I'm saying
the
let's look
question is,
around
if you
at the
start from
world.
what you see and look forward, would you
Yes.
reach that conclusion?
Yeah. So let's start with what we see. That's
Right.
what I like to start with, because actually that is my starting point. Okay.
Right.
I believe a story, but I'm not starting with the story. I'm
Right.
starting with just, look, I'm a person trying to observe reality and find out what's going on. Okay.
Right.
And so when I look at reality, I see an orderly universe. I don't understand why an orderly universe would have assembled. I don't understand why there would be something rather than nothing. I don't understand why the universe is orderly. I don't understand why it would go according to natural law if it wasn't designed this way. These are the
Right.
features of design. When I look at plants, when I don't even have to know that much about biology. Look, I could take a seed and plant it into the ground, and it sprouts up and into something that gives food and can reproduce itself. Okay, this is incredible. All of that ability is packed into a tiny seed.
Right.
Okay? Now,
Right.
we haven't even been able to construct anything that fantastic, right? All
Right.
of our human intelligence combined cannot construct something like a seed with all
Right.
of that capability. So my assumption about the world when I look at a seed is this has to be designed. Like this is the product of a designer, because
But you
this
just
is
said
my
that we can't design anything that good.
yeah. So what I'm saying is,
Also,
yeah, there
right.
has to be an intelligence going beyond my intelligence and your intelligence.
Right. So if this thing
thought this
cannot be
up.
designed, why do you think that it was designed?
Well, I'm saying it has the properties of an intelligent designer. It has the properties that would point to design, and a design that's so much better than anything that we could design. Okay, so what should I choose? What would be more logical if I'm looking at a seed and I'm thinking about all that it's capable of? Which is more logical? What's a more logical conclusion? It's designed, or it just happened that way, like natural processes, no intelligence involved. Which one is
right? I mean, we can design things with evolutionary algorithms, and we can actually see this thing. But you know, the watchmaker argument: you're walking in a field and you see a watch, and then somebody says, you know, it must have been designed. So let's imagine you're walking in a watchmaker shop and you see a slug. And watchmaker says, I designed that, you know, and you'd be like, get out of here. You know, you cannot design slugs. We know slugs come from other slugs, which come from other slugs. So my observation tells me that these natural things comes from other natural things. There's no designer as far as I can see. That's just the way things are. Now, how did that all start? Well, that's a mystery. But to say we make watches, therefore slugs must be designed, that just doesn't follow.
Well, there are some complaints that can be made about the watchmaker, the construction of the
Right.
watchmaker argument. Okay, there's some complaints that can be made about that, but still, if you consider a slug, what is a better explanation for the slug's existence?
It
Did
came
it
from
come
another slug,
about
right?
okay, but at some point there's got to be like the slug has to come about from somewhere, right? So, like,
Well,
is
some
it better
other less complicated slug, maybe.
right? But Mirza, when we look at the fossil record, when we look at the things, okay, that are supposed to have been, and I don't accept the evolutionary timeline, but we look at creatures that were alive 500 million years ago, according to the timeline. Okay,
Right.
and those creatures, we find a similar creature today, right?
Right.
When we examine those creatures, they may be simpler in some respects, but they are incredibly complex.
Yeah.
In every single cell of life. I mean, we just talked about the ribosome. There's 10 million ribosomes in a mammalian cell, and that's just one little part of the integrated cell functioning. So
Right. And then that went from it took billions of years for multicellular life to come, and there were times where there were only slugs and no vertebrates, and so we can see that in the fossil record. But you're saying, okay, even though 500 million years ago there were slugs, those slugs were still incredibly complex. Okay, sure, then go back another 500 million and another 500 million. We have eukaryote cells, that have organelles, and some of those we can see came from other bacteria. And we're talking about billions of years over the entire life of the planet, and there'll be many things we just have no idea how they happened. But we can see things happening, and we can see this, just like the antibiotic. We can see this thing happen. It's like a slug can go a mile in a week, but you're saying it cannot go 100 miles in 2 years, right? If it can go a little bit, it can go in a little bit of time. I don't see why it can go a lot in a lot of time.
Okay, well, I mean, that sounds like a story that you're choosing to believe, but time doesn't.
I mean, if you have a better one.
Time doesn't really help. Well, I think the better story is God created. God created you. When I look at you, I'm seeing someone who is created in the image of God, loved by God. God has a plan to bring you into his kingdom. That's what, and to me, that's a much better story.
And but have you ever seen God? Have you ever no. No. And you've seen things like evolve. You see bacteria get resistant. You see different breeds of dogs come about.
Well, yes, but that is what all of that happens from what is already possible. And I mean, mutations can contribute, but mutations are mostly degrading things, not building new organs and systems. But what you're talking about, speciation, we're just talking about things that happen through natural genetic variation, gene flow, these kinds of things. But remember, what you've got to do with evolution is by natural processes get these incredibly complex machinery to come together to form and make all of these processes happen in a cell, and then connect those cells to the larger organism, right? And have all the processes working in harmony together. And it's very difficult to imagine mutations bringing about those things when mutations are working in the wrong direction.
The mutations are, but natural selection works in the opposite direction, so they work in tandem. The thing is, we can see this mutation, we can see evolution happening on a small scale, right? And we say, okay, maybe this is the answer on a big scale over billions of years. Maybe it's wrong, maybe, but we never seen God. Like, we never seen things pop into existence. We never seen, like, how would that work? That just did like Bible says God created man out of mud and breathed into him, like, would that really do it? You know? Or for example, if you believe God created man, and do you believe in fall, right?
Yes.
You believe in that, right? So there was no death or disease before that, right? And then Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, and now we have disease. So then where did the immune system come from? Like,
Yeah.
did we
Well-
have immune system before there was disease, or did we get the immune system because Eve ate the apple? Or, you know, how does that work?
Well, you know, when I decide to go out on a hike, I take a first aid kit. I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to need the first aid kit,
Right.
but I've got it there just in case. Now,
Why do you have immune system,
so
though?
I
That's the
believe
thing.
God created, and he created you within an immune system, right?
So there
in
was no
case-
disease, but there was an immune system
In case
in case
in case you
sin.
needed it, in case you needed it. Like my first aid kit, I don't want to use it, but I have it in case I need it.
So God
And-
created immune system before there was disease,
Yes,
and in
that's
case,
what I believe. Yeah.
and He created melanin in case there was radiation, and I don't know. That just see that's hard to swallow, won't you say? That kind of seems.
Not for me.
Well, doesn't it make more sense that we involved with diseases? That's why we have immune system versus God made it before there was disease in case there would be disease. I mean,
You know, immune systems are incredible. So I would
Yes.
like to know, under natural processes, how do you get an immune system to know what to do and to integrate itself into your bloodstream and parts of your body and function in order to help you? How do you get that to happen by a process of mutations and natural selection?
right. Everybody is a little different, and those who are a little bit better will survive the disease, and those that are not will not. And then the ones who survived will have kids, and those kids will be slightly different from each other, and so on. It's like some rabbits are a little faster than other rabbits, and some foxes are a little faster than other foxes, and slow rabbits get eaten, slow foxes starve. You know, it's a slow process, and we can see this happening. With bacteria, we can see it with big animals. We can see it happening on a small scale, and we can see it, in fact, with bacterial resistance. That's kind of like an immune system for bacteria, right? We can see, antibiotic resistance. We can actually see it develop over time, and we can actually see immune systems develop over time, and so on. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to fathom billions of years. Your brain has 96 billion brain cells, right? And with that, you have to understand incredible time and space, and you just can't wrap your hand around it, but that doesn't just because we cannot understand it, that doesn't mean that there's a simple explanation that just makes sense.
Well, we all have a choice about what we believe about origins. And by the way, I have to get off in 5 minutes, so we have to
I'm
kind
sorry.
of
It's
wrap
so
it
nice
up.
to talk to you. I really enjoy talking to you.
Thank you. I
and
enjoy
I hope to
talking
talk
to
to you
you
again.
too. Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
a very reasonable person to talk to. I want to let you make a last point if you want to.
Yeah, and then my point is basically I don't think in terms of what's true. I think in terms of what I can prove, right? Given the facts, what can be known, not what is true, what can be. So I try to look prospectively, based on everything that I've seen and based on everything that I know, what is possible versus me believing X and then looking for proof that supports it. So that's my point.
Okay.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you. Nice talking to you.
Nice talking to
Rebecca.
you too. And Snorkel the World says, "Has anyone given evidence for evolution?"
All right, I'll get out. Hold on.
Okay. All right. Bye, Mirza. And I want to say no, but I do have to check on something that Dr. Dan said. So I will get back to you on that. But other than that, no one shared evidence for evolution. Nesslig might be annoyed by that because he believes that this paper that he showed me is showing evidence for evolution. But I will explain one last time that actually, if evolution is true, then the paper gives a reasoning for the model, right? But it's the entire paper is assuming evolution is true. There's not a shred of evidence given for evolution. And I don't have to understand what everything being referred to in the paper is talking about to see that. Okay. So I can read the statements that are being made and understand that there's no evidence being offered. And if anyone challenges that, great. Bring it on next time. Show me how I'm wrong. And I'd be happy to see that. So thank you everybody for being here. I appreciate all your comments in the chat. And I appreciate people being willing to come on who have scientific knowledge like Dr. Dan and Nesslig. And I love the conversation with Mirza. So thank you all and see you next time.